Welcome from Second Congregational Church. I'm Reverend Max Grant. I'm the senior minister, and we are in that season of the year when we begin to talk about the church's plans for next year and also to enjoy some of the key moments and some of the key things that we have learned as a church community over the course of the last year or so. And so, as I said before, you hear a lot from the senior minister this time of year, and yet it's not just the senior minister who makes things happen. And we know that especially right now because Jenny Bixby, our Minister for Care and Connection, has been involved in so many aspects of our church's life and has brought new energy, new possibility, and all kinds of new ideas to just about everything that we do. And so who better to talk about what really happens and how we do it than Jenny Bixby? And so I'm just going to ask a few questions and give people a chance to sort of hear from you about what this year has been like and kind of where we're going. So with that said, what do you think today's families seem to need most from a church?
So I think first, when we think of church, we think of a building. You know, that's often what comes to mind is the actual physical institution. And church is such a beautiful and sacred space, and it is an important part of what church is. But church at 2CC is so much more than church. It's community, it's the caring, the connection, all those things that are in my title. It's Christ, it's children. I think all those things is what our families that we're seeing come through our doors and how they come to us need from a church life, not just beyond the walls of the building.
Right. No, it's so interesting, right, that there is this focus that we get of church as a place rather than a community, a body of people, right? How do you think we help people to make that shift?
So, you know, I think the last decade or so has been very interesting with technology and how we connect with each other. You know, one thing I've been learning is as we have more ways of communication with one another, Instagram, Facebook, you know, all sorts of emails, texts, all different ways to communicate, I'm finding the more personal I can connect with people and the more invitational I can connect with people, whether that be a visit, a phone call, a note, seems to be how that resonates more with our families. And it's really interesting because it goes against the opposite of the abundance of ways we have to communicate, to also go back to the kind of more old-fashioned ways of connecting with one another. I find our families are not only needing that, but craving that time and that personalized attention. I also think in this digital world that we're living in, work schedules have changed for parents, life schedules have changed for parents, even how we do school. You know, the days of the snow days may not exist anymore.
Right.
So how we do church or how we are church, not just the building, looks different. And at 2CC, we're really able to be flexible and meet everybody where they're at. Because I'm learning that church, there's no one-size-fits-all model. And I take great pride that here at 2CC, we really work hard to do that well, to see everybody, to love them, and to make church however it fits into their lives.
That's great. So you've sort of answered my second question, which is, you know, given sort of that need, what are the ways that we try to respond? So maybe help me see if I were a newcomer and I said, you all seem like such nice people.
Yeah.
I like you, Bixby. How is this going to work with my life? What is this thing you're asking me to come do now?
Well, you know, 2CC, we're very invitational. You know, we have external activities that look at the outside community and how we can bring you in. That could be a yoga, that could be a mom's group breakfast, that can be, we have the Halloween haunt happening this weekend.
That's right, yeah.
What are the community-based activities that invite people in to get to know us and to get to know one another? And then we have more internal activities of our subcommittees of like community life and mom's group and outreach, where we kind of foster those relationships inward and maybe outward into the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I came here on a Sunday, I would see you running around. If I got here early enough, I would see you in your apron, your 2CC apron, kind of getting things all set and everything prepped. But if I came in at 10:30, you know, the bell's ringing and I'm finding my way. I'd see you for a few minutes in worship, and then you'd go to some other place. The kids would all follow you. You know, the energy in the sanctuary drops. That's how we know that you're gone. But other than that sort of little window into, oh yeah, that's Jenny, and that, you know, she's leading the kids out. What's your work week actually like? Kind of what's below the surface of the water? If your time is an iceberg, what's below the surface?
I mean, I would say, you know, ask any minister, is the beginning or the end of the week on a Sunday. For me, a Sunday is the inspiration for the remainder of the week. Sunday for me is also the heart of the week. A lot of time, thought, prayer goes into children's chapel.
Right.
We do have a sermon in children's chapel. We try to make it a worship experience. I try to make it not like school. They have school. How can we make this different? How can we also touch the life of a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old and leave them inspired for the week ahead? So we're more experience-based, Montessori-based, and I want them to feel something when they leave with us. So the week kind of ebbs and flows depending upon the church calendar, whether we're in Advent or Lent, or what's happening in the world, what are the joys and concerns of the children. So planning and preparation for the Sundays. And then we look towards the internal and external activities we're doing during the week, and that care and connection that happens at all ages and stages to make sure people are connected to each other and to our church and loving and supporting each other.
Yeah, that's great.
And we also, you know, we're a church. I like to say I'd rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies. And we're a robust, mighty staff, but we're small, and we really need our congregation to love one another to make things happen. And whatever they need in order to make whatever life of the church happen for them, we're all on call at any moment for anything.
Right, sure.
At any time. So that's more or less how the week would flow. So sometimes sometimes it's a hard week. It includes yoga, coffee for good,
Right, oh boy.
or seeing a football game.
Oh,
you know,
no, not that.
There's some really hard weeks in there, don't get me wrong. And then there's a Christmas pageant thrown in, and, you know, gingerbread house making, and all those kind of different things. And then it's also being present when somebody, with their mourning and when they're celebrating, and with children.
Yeah. So one thing that you said that's really interesting is, you know, is Sunday the end of your week or the beginning of your week? And one of the things that I think is really true for us as a staff is we're very spiritually focused folks, or we wouldn't do what we do. But at the same time, the work of planning a service and presiding at a service, writing a sermon for Children's Chapel, or thinking through what you're going to say, there are all these aspects where you're setting up an experience for other people to have. How is it that you find your own soul gets fed in the course of a Sunday? Or do you have to do that at kind of other times in order to tank up in the way that you need to?
It's an and in both.
Okay.
I am most inspired by children.
Okay.
We have scripture that says, in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, we need to become like them. Let the little children come to me. I do find children exceptionally inspiring and wonderful and joyful in every possible way. My daughter Libby, when she was little, she used to always, like 2 or 3 years old, how come? How come? Everything was how come? And later that translated to, well, what if? What if? And I'm coming to find the older that I get and the more experience I have, whether as a human or as a spouse or as a parent, chaplaincy, whatever it might be, more is in the questions than in the answers. Truly. I used to be a person who wanted the answer right away, need to have it in order to kind of move forward, and being able to sit with the questions. I learned so much from children and their questions. So much so that recently I've been trying to translate their joys and concerns, so we do our own version of joys and concerns.
That's right.
And bring some, I edit them.
Right.
But bring at least the top 3 or 4 downstairs so people can hear.
Yeah.
I believe children should be heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
They should not be screaming per se all the time, but sometimes, you know, this is our church. But I've been bringing their joys and concerns down because it's in their questions, it's in their joys and concerns that I get my bucket filled. I also love the 8:30 service. It's
Right.
a conversation, it's inspirational. So I get to ask my how comes and what ifs, because
Interesting.
sometimes I'm left lingering and I email Max later that night with a thought that I just can't get out of my head. That's how I fill my bucket.
Yeah.
I enjoy reading. I try to read one book that challenges me and one book that's just simply pure fun.
That's great.
Those fill my bucket. And my neighborhood, I often tell stories about my neighborhood,
Sure.
but we have a wonderful, eclectic, funny group of children and parents, and I don't know why, a lot of them are often at my house.
I can't imagine why.
It's life-giving, but my bucket gets filled in being present, and I think that you and I both take pride in, although I don't look like my Sunday self on Monday, I do enjoy sweatpants and jeans, but I'm the same person Sunday as I am on Monday. It's the same, it's fluid throughout the week. So that's what I try to invite the children to be. Whoever your Christ-loving self is on Sunday, and mom may put you in the blazer or whatever it might be that same person tomorrow.
Oh, that's great.
You know?
Yeah. I think it is really true with kids. One of the things that's such a blessing about having them around and really learning from them is kids are real. And kids are bringing the real all the time. And there's something that is so powerful about that and so sacred about that. And when I think of the kingdom and the invitation that the kingdom represents, I think it is this invitation to be authentic in the way that they are, you know, and to open ourselves up to that is to actually invite a kind of vulnerability that comes harder when you're older.
100%. We had an experience during hygiene kit making where we had all intergenerations, all had a part that somebody could partake in. It was a really wonderful rhythm and sense of community. And this little boy, Carter, who I have affectionate awe for, there were a couple speakers, and he demanded and wanted to speak. And he was trembling, and he stood by the side of the stage. And it could have been kids say the darndest things. I had no idea. His mother is a loving, kind woman. I knew she would be, supportive, whatever came out of the child's mouth. And I said, you know what, Carter, if you feel so profoundly you need to go up and speak what's on your heart, you do it.
Let's do it. Yeah, right.
And I was there to catch the mic at any moment.
Just in case.
And he just poured out
That was so
his
lovely.
love and affection for church. He did say, Jenny makes me do a lot of stuff.
Well, you do make us do a lot of stuff.
He felt, imagine us adults having to stand up before a congregation and just felt so called to share our love for one another. You know, I don't know if I could be that brave.
You can be that.
Maybe.
But he can be that.
That's where I get inspired.
That's great.
I also get inspired by the mom who comes out of the car, or the dad who gets out of the car and has 2 or 3 children in tow and like bringing them in, because it's not easy.
No.
That to me is heroic.
Absolutely.
It takes so much to get them in the seat, out the seat, on the curb. One runs away, one has the food, one lost the shoe. Just to make it in is a process, and that to me is heroic, that they so badly want to be part of what's happening here.
Absolutely right. Well, on behalf of all of us, I really want to thank you for all of the ways in which you are instrumental in them wanting to be here and in helping people to find their way into a community, especially when it's really new. And the proof is in the pudding, and it's in the voices of our children and the presence of our children and the gratitude of our families, which takes many different forms, and we see in many different kinds of places here at 2CC, and more and more and more, and a great deal of that has a lot to do with the love that you give and the tone that you set and the welcome that you offer. So thank you very much. Thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.